Winters in Britain during the 1950s were a true test of endurance and spirit, a season that reached into every aspect of daily existence. The nation was still emerging from the shadows of war, with rationing only just beginning to ease and comfort remaining a rarity. Snow and frost crept through drafty window frames, and the air carried the lingering haze of coal smoke, tinting the sky a dull gray. Children walked slippery pavements in worn shoes, mothers warmed bottles for the night, and fathers hauled heavy coal scuttles to feed the hearth. If this content speaks to you, don't let the story end here. Leave a comment, join the conversation, and help us keep these voices alive. Subscribe for more journeys through time, and together, let's ensure these cities are never forgotten. Without further ado, let's continue. Coal fires formed the very heart of British homes in that era. Their glow was faint but cherished, the center around which families gathered, even though the warmth rarely spread beyond a single room. Bedrooms and hallways stayed freezing, constant reminders of how limited comfort could be. The fire symbolized more than heat. It was the household soul, a fragile shield against the endless chill. Children hurried to bed wearing layers of sweaters and wool socks, hugging hot water bottles filled from the kettle. Blankets were stacked high, yet the cold slipped in beneath doors and through cracked window panes. Falling asleep often meant shivering until the body gave in to the temperature, turning rest into a nightly act of resilience. Windows became storytellers of their own. Frost would paint delicate, lace-like patterns on the inside of the glass, as though nature was leaving its mark on the absence of insulation. Mornings began with scraping frozen panes or wiping away condensation so daylight could enter. That persistent frost became part of home life, just as much as the furniture itself. Still, the coal fire brought more than physical survival. It created moments of connection. Families swapped stories, played board games, or simply sat together watching flames dance while the wind howled outside. The crackling sound became the soundtrack of winter, one of the few constants in a time when stability was rare. It was the fragile boundary between endurance and despair. Snowfall transformed towns and villages into hushed, glittering worlds. For children, it was a time of joy, sledging down slopes and hurling snowballs in laughter, while adults faced blocked roads, halted buses, and burst pipes. Beneath the beauty, life required persistence. Families trudged through knee-deep drifts to reach shops, balancing wonder with necessity. Deliveries became small triumphs, proof of human determination. Milk bottles froze solid on doorsteps, their metal caps bulging upwards in icy peaks. Postmen carried on, boots crunching through frost to deliver letters. Routine itself became an act of courage, binding communities together through hardship. For children, the snow created magical memories, boots soaked, cheeks flushed, laughter echoing down white streets. Yet every snowman built was matched by adults battling to shovel paths, scatter salt, and keep daily life moving. The same snow that inspired joy also demanded unending labor. When night fell, the snow-covered streets glowed under gas lamps and the first electric lights, reflections stretching long across frozen ground. Few dared step outside, but those who did never forgot the sight, the silent beauty of a town blanketed in white. Snow was both hardship and fleeting magic. Schools offered little warmth during the coldest months. Many classrooms relied on a single stove, and pupils huddled in coats, scarves, and mittens while writing lessons in neat lines. The chalk dust mingled with a faint cloud of children's breath. Learning persisted despite the cold, as perseverance was seen as part of one's education. Playgrounds froze over, turning into slippery battlegrounds where skinned knees and frozen fingers were common. Students returned to class stiff from the chill, their faces flushed red. Snowball fights brought joy but also pain, as the cold stung every touch. For teachers, endurance was equally vital. Many corrected papers by lamplight, braving drafts that slipped through brick walls. Occasionally, classes were dismissed early during storms, though seldom without hesitation. Order and discipline remained steadfast, embodying a national sense of duty. Exams and recitations went on regardless of the weather, reinforcing the era's belief that learning should never yield to hardship. The chill of the schoolroom became a collective memory, proof that winter, too, could teach resilience. Food rationing lingered into the decade, and scarcity shaped every meal. Boiled potatoes, cabbage, and thin stews stretched what little meat there was. A bubbling pot on the stove offered both sustenance and warmth, filling the house with comforting smells. Luxury was rare, so simplicity became sacred. Families reused leftovers, preserved vegetables, and found endless ways to make do. Jam, syrup, or tinned fruit were precious treats, often saved for holidays. In kitchens, creativity met necessity. Hunger kept at bay through ingenuity. Rural families sometimes shared milk, eggs, or garden produce with neighbors, strengthening community ties. In cities, queues outside bakeries and butchers were reminders that food was never to be taken for granted. The aroma of fresh bread drifting through the cold air brought momentary relief to those waiting in line. Children learned early the importance of gratitude. Wasting food was unthinkable. Winter dishes, though humble, became symbols of unity and survival. December of 1952 brought one of Britain's darkest winters. A lethal mix of fog and coal smoke smothered London for nearly a week, turning the air thick and yellow. Visibility fell to mere feet, paralyzing transport and forcing people indoors. The Great Smog became a silent disaster, claiming thousands of lives. Hospitals overflowed with patients struggling to breathe. Buses halted, pedestrians groped through the haze with scarves tight over their faces, and lamps glowed dimly in the murk. The city, long accustomed to fog, realized this was something far more deadly. Families sealed their windows with rags and newspapers, desperate to keep the smoke out. Schools closed, businesses stopped, and the only sound was coughing echoing in the stillness. The tragedy exposed the dangers of coal dependency and led to lasting reform. The Clean Air Act followed soon after, forever changing how Britain faced its winters. Yet those who lived through that suffocating week never forgot it. A winter when nature and industry combined in lethal harmony. Clothing in the 1950s was purely practical. Heavy wool coats were passed down through generations. Scarves, gloves, and rubber boots became everyday armor against the cold. Fashion gave way to function. Mothers mended holes, reknitted sweaters, and patched worn fabrics, every repair a testament to thrift and perseverance. Children wore mismatched layers to school, their uniforms buried beneath coats. In playgrounds, bundled figures ran and slipped, faces barely visible between scarves. On the streets, hats and mittens were essential, and style existed only in magazines. Clothing itself became a language of endurance, telling the story of each winter in its frayed seams. As darkness fell, families retreated indoors. Radios and early televisions replaced the outside world. The coal fire glowed at the heart of the home, its warmth drawing everyone close. Evenings were filled with quiet activity. Mothers sewing, fathers reading, children playing simple games. Power cuts were common, leaving rooms lit by candles and oil lamps, shadows flickering on frosted windows. Entertainment was humble yet memorable. Cards, knitting, or the steady voice from the wireless. Togetherness itself became comfort, the truest defense against the cold. Traveling in winter tested patience and endurance alike. Buses skidded across icy streets, trains stalled on frozen rails, and commuters stood shivering on dim platforms. Conductors punched tickets with stiff fingers while passengers huddled together for warmth. Rail closures meant long walks through biting wind or slippery cobblestones. Journeys became slow, tiring, and unpredictable, but people adapted. Brief moments of camaraderie appeared in shared discomfort, small talk, or laughter over the shared absurdity of the weather. Christmas brought light to the gloom. Paper chains, glass ornaments, and tinsel-decorated homes, while church bells reminded communities of joy amid hardship. Parents stretched budgets to provide modest feasts of mince pies and puddings. Children dreamed of toy trains and sweets. Gifts were simple: hand-knitted scarves, dolls, or books, but cherished deeply. Carolers braved frozen streets, and school plays filled halls with warmth and laughter. Celebration cut through the bleakness, proving that even the harshest winter could not dim the human spirit. The winters of the 1950s have never been forgotten by those who endured them. Frosted glass, smoky air, and the crunch of boots on icy streets remain vivid in memory. Cold was more than weather. It shaped how families lived, worked, and cared for one another. The season tested endurance, but it also revealed strength. Around every hearth, between every rationed meal, grew the values of thrift, unity, and compassion. Those winters defined a generation not by what they lacked, but by how they endured. Looking back, the cold of the 1950s was as defining as it was punishing. Frosted windows, snow-filled roads, and rationed kitchens shaped the rhythm of life, binding people together in shared struggle. These memories speak not only of hardship, but of courage and community. Even today, the sight of a crackling fire or the sound of footsteps on frozen ground recalls the spirit of a generation that faced the chill with unyielding strength and quiet dignity. The arrival of winter in post-war Britain was not just a change in season, but a shift in rhythm that affected every aspect of life. People measured days by the sound of kettles boiling and the slow crackle of firewood. Streets emptied earlier as darkness fell, and the glow of a single lamppost could feel like a beacon in the frozen dusk. Every routine, from walking to work to washing clothes, became slower and more deliberate. The biting air forced patience, reminding everyone that nature still ruled over human pace and comfort. Even small domestic tasks took on new meaning. Hanging laundry in winter required determination. Garments froze stiff on the line before they could dry. Mothers often brought them inside to hang by the stove, filling kitchens with the mingled scent of coal smoke and damp fabric. The daily struggle to keep warmth inside and frost outside turned every household into a small fortress against the elements. Families learned to seal cracks with old newspapers and cloth, transforming scarcity into invention. The early mornings were especially memorable. Frost glazed the rooftops and fences, sparkling faintly under the first hint of daylight. The sound of footsteps on icy pavement echoed through the quiet streets as milkmen and workers began their routes. Steam rose from kettles, fogging cold windows, and the aroma of tea or porridge drifted from kitchens. In these quiet hours, before the city fully woke, winter revealed both its loneliness and its beauty, a silence so profound that even the smallest sound seemed sacred. In the countryside, the season brought both hardship and stillness. Farmers woke before dawn to break ice from animal troughs and check on livestock. The landscape, blanketed in snow, appeared serene but demanded constant labor. Tractors often refused to start, and paths to barns had to be cleared daily. Yet amidst the struggle, there was a peace that city dwellers seldom knew. The muffled air, the distant caw of crows, and the soft crunch of snow beneath boots gave rural winters a rhythm of endurance and reflection. Families found comfort in ritual. Weekly trips to local markets, even in the harshest weather, became important acts of connection. People exchanged greetings, shared news, and sometimes swapped scarce goods, coal, eggs, or even candles. The sense of community deepened during these frozen months. The simple kindness of helping a neighbor light a fire or carrying groceries through the snow built quiet bonds that lasted long after winter had passed. For many, church services offered both warmth and solace. Candles flickered against cold stone walls, and hymns echoed through air so cold that breath turned visible. Christmas masses were especially poignant. The glow of the altar, the smell of pine branches, and the sound of choirs reminded people that even in scarcity, beauty could survive. The collective faith, whether religious or simply human, became an anchor against the long, dark season. Evenings often carried a sense of calm that few modern winters can replicate. Without constant electricity or noise, families lived in a slower rhythm. The flicker of firelight danced on wallpaper, and the ticking of clocks filled the silence. Conversations were unhurried, and stories passed from one generation to another by the warmth of the hearth. Parents shared tales of their own childhood winters, teaching their children not only history but gratitude, for warmth, for shelter, for each other. The air itself seemed different in those years. The combination of coal smoke, frost, and chimney steam created a scent that lingered in every scarf and coat. It was both harsh and comforting, a reminder of survival. Walking home through that smoky haze meant feeling part of something shared, a collective endurance that tied everyone together, from factory workers to school children. Winter also carried a strange beauty after storms had passed. Streets shimmered under a pale sun, icicles hung from eaves like glass ornaments, and ponds froze into perfect mirrors. The world seemed suspended, frozen in time. Children marveled at how sound traveled differently through the snow, soft and distant. For a few fleeting days, the hardships faded, replaced by wonder at the transformed landscape. Looking back now, those winters seem both harsher and purer. There was less comfort but more meaning in every act of survival. Lighting a fire, cooking a hot meal, or simply sharing silence became victories against the cold. People learned that endurance was not just about strength, but about togetherness. Each frostbitten morning, each snow-covered street, and each quiet evening by the fire helped forge a kind of resilience that would shape the character of Britain for generations to come. In many working-class neighborhoods, the sound of the coalman's cart was as familiar as church bells. His arrival was greeted with relief, the rumble of wheels echoing through narrow streets as he shoveled black dust into metal bins. Children watched from doorways, faces smudged with curiosity and soot, while mothers hurried to pay before hurrying back inside to escape the cold. The delivery meant survival for another week, warmth, light, and the comfort of a glowing hearth in the long winter nights. Factories, too, bore the season's mark. Workers arrived before dawn, their breath rising in the freezing air as they stepped into dimly lit buildings. Machines clanked and whirred, but the cold crept through every crack. Gloves were thin, and hands ached from metal handles turned icy by morning frost. Yet production rarely stopped. Britain's post-war recovery demanded constancy, and perseverance became a quiet national duty. Every shift, every hour spent in that biting air, was a contribution to rebuilding the nation. For children, even school journeys became adventures in endurance. They trudged through sleet and slush, their boots soaked, scarves wrapped high around their faces. Each step was a battle against the wind. Yet there was laughter, too, races through puddles, snowball fights on corners, and the thrill of seeing their breath mist before them like smoke. Childhood innocence softened the sting of winter, transforming hardship into play, even when clothes clung damply for the rest of the day. Inside small shops, the season carried its own rituals. The smell of paraffin heaters mixed with that of bread, tobacco, and damp wool. Customers rubbed their hands together for warmth while exchanging quiet conversation about the weather, a topic that bound everyone in mutual understanding. Storekeepers worked in layers of coats and scarves, their breath visible as they weighed flour or wrapped parcels in brown paper. These modest spaces became social sanctuaries where the outside chill briefly loosened its grip. In hospitals and clinics, nurses fought a different battle. Colds, pneumonia, and bronchitis spread easily in the unheated homes of the poor. The wards were crowded, the windows fogged, and the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and coal smoke. Yet compassion never froze. Doctors and nurses worked long hours in frigid corridors, armed only with blankets, determination, and the steady belief that things would improve. Their endurance mirrored the nation's, quiet, constant, and profoundly human. Public gatherings carried their own sense of defiance against the cold. Market days continued despite frozen stalls and stiff fingers. Theaters and picture houses drew crowds seeking escape, their interiors glowing with heat and laughter. Couples held hands beneath shared coats, whispering through clouds of breath. Music halls, still alive in the decade, offered both warmth and cheer, reminders that joy could survive even in the harshest weather. And when the first hints of spring appeared, a slight softness in the air, a puddle instead of ice, a single bird's call, it felt like deliverance. People opened windows cautiously, letting in sunlight though the air still carried a chill. The last lumps of coal in the scuttle were burned with quiet satisfaction. Gardens, long frozen, began to stir. Winter had tested everyone, but it had also strengthened them. Survival brought pride, and pride turned to hope for the next season. Those who lived through the 1950s often said that winter shaped the soul. It stripped life to its essentials: warmth, food, companionship, and reminded people of their dependence on one another. It was in the coldest moments that kindness mattered most: a shared fire, a lent blanket, a neighbor's knock at the door. These simple gestures outlasted the frost, carrying warmth far beyond the season itself. If these memories moved you, don't let the story end here. Leave a comment, join the conversation, and help us keep these voices alive. Subscribe for more journeys through time, and together, let's ensure these cities are never forgotten. See you next time.